Well,
Mhm.
gentlemen, it is 12:05. I think we're going to get started and hope everyone is ready to rock and roll and enjoy this webinar that we have this Thursday. Wanted to share one thing with you that is going to be an immense benefit to you all. We have a Memorial Day sale that is going to be 50% off of everything that we have when it comes to generative AI architecture, cloud development architecture, enterprise architecture, elite bundle, and everything else that we have. It is going to be a tremendous benefit to your career and your career trajectory. Take advantage of this sale. We'll have more details as well. So, gentlemen, I would love to hear what you all have to say about what the topic is today, what we're going to be, any questions that we have from our audience, and how you're going to answer them.
Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Mike Gibbs. I'm the founder and CEO of GoCloud Careers. Joining us today is Alonzo Coleman. He's my Chief Marketing Officer, and David Lithicum. David is a legend in the cloud computing world. He was Deloitte's head of cloud strategy. He's an expert on AI. He's a great friend. Together, David and I are going to talk about what is a cloud architect today. We're going to talk about what does a cloud architect do. Well, we will both talk in some way, shape, or form about why cloud architecture, along with enterprise architecture and AI architecture, are the best jobs for 2024 and beyond. We will go over the key skills on how to become a great cloud architect. I'll get into some detail about the certifications we recommend and teach. And by the way, certifications don't teach architecture, but they do some valuable things, which we'll actually talk about. And then we'll talk about how we build the best cloud architects. And of course, you can ask David or I any kind of question you want about cloud architecture, and we want to help you. So before we begin, a little about me. I've been an architect now for actually over 25 years. Cloud architect, a network architect, business architect, an enterprise architect, you name it. If there's an architecture role, I've done it and loved it. And David has too. In these 25 years, I've spent about a decade as a lead architect at Cisco Systems, responsible for their entire healthcare vertical. Prior to that, I was a principal architect at Riverstone Networks. So I've consulted to about half of the world's internet service providers. Before that, I was a principal architect at Comcast, where I was responsible for the design of their backbone, and they're one of the largest internet service providers in the United States. And then I was a lead architect at MCI WorldCom. And I've spent about 2 decades right now helping people just like you get your first tech job, and that includes architecture jobs, get promoted in tech, or negotiate raises, that kind of thing. So that's my background. Now, David is an expert. David, would you like to talk about your background for a minute or two?
Sure. I started out my career back when I was 18 years old as a AI analyst. I was doing some Lisp development for some big telecom companies. Then had the normal development career, got into C, C++, and object-oriented development, things like that, and became an architect in the 90s when I was working for Mobil Oil, doing the IT architecture for the banks that they were building there to invest their money. Parlayed that into some jobs at some consulting companies, actually a young partner at a big consulting company back then. Then I became CTO of several technology companies, all sold, and we're doing like a 3-year stint, sell them, things like that, focused on technology strategy and how we're building technology. Got into cloud computing in 2003 when I became CTO of Grand Central. I was a chief architect there and CTO, and then parlayed that into some consulting careers. And I've been a consultant and a CEO, multiple jobs, typical stuff, all focused on technology. And the last about 20 years has been focused on cloud computing architecture, believe it or not. We're actually doing that with the whole SaaS stuff, built multi-tenant systems back in the early 2000s, and been working on that really kind of as a discipline for a long period of time. Just left Deloitte after 6 years, took retirement. I was the chief cloud strategy officer there. I focus on education. I focus on how people are leveraging this technology to the success of the enterprise. And it's great to be here.
And thank you so much for that, David. Now I'm going to make it very clear. All of you, if you desire to, can become cloud architects. All of you. It doesn't matter your background. It matters your willingness to learn and the skills you actually have. And I'll give you examples from both sides of the spectrum. Harsha was a cloud engineer for 10 years before we trained him and converted him into a cloud architect. Pritipal Sejan was in tech for about 20 years as a software developer before we trained him and got him a job as an enterprise architect. So they're your people that were in tech and engineering, which actually people think is similar to architecture, but it really isn't. And it's also the story of Pierre Dassault, who was working on sailboats, who got his first job after our training as a solutions architect over at LeaseWeb, or Al Legister, who was a sales rep for Kimberly-Clark, a consumer products group, who then became a senior solutions architect at his first job at Deloitte. And it's an example of Vladimir, who was 24 years old, fresh out of college before we trained him, and he didn't study technology in college, and he got hired at North Highland. Or Ivan Tamba, or Coyote, or Jordan Kittico, that were hired by AWS as their first tech jobs out of college after our training. Or Delroy Batt, who worked on ambulances, whose first job was a senior solution architect. Or Balwinder, who was a stay-at-home mom, whose first job was a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. Or Jennifer Ema, who was a mental health tech who got hired by JP Morgan Chase as a solution architect after our training, as their first tech job. All of you can do it. So before we begin, we have to define what is a cloud architect. And this is the reason most people get themselves in trouble. They want to be cloud architects. They work so hard. They learn, they spend years, and then they still can't either clear the interview or get hired for the cloud architect. And we're going to talk about why. The cloud architect is a hybrid position. Hybrid. It is mostly an executive with technology professional kind of married together in there. And it's honestly one of the most strategic technology careers in the entire world. And here's the reason why. In our world right now, technology itself is going to be the ultimate competitive advantage. Yet, most organizations spend a fortune on technology and derive no value from it. Most technology projects fail. It's not that the technology doesn't work. The technology works. That's the easy piece. But the projects fail because there's a disconnect between the business's goals and the business's needs, and the technology systems that are actually in place. The cloud architect is the person responsible in terms of aligning the organization's people, their processes, and their technology in order to maximize and optimize business performance. So then, what does a cloud architect actually do? Well, it all starts in a process like this. And if you notice, cloud architecture and enterprise architecture are going to feel very similar. And here's the reason why. What is cloud? It's kind of organization systems. If they have a data center, and maybe they're running OpenStack or Nutanix, it's a cloud. If they're with AWS and Azure and Google, it's a cloud. And all cloud computing really is space in a network and a data center. Basically, like you could check into a hotel room and get your room, or you could buy a house. Cloud computing is renting that hotel room. You're basically renting space in someone else's data center. There's nothing more to it than that. So what do we do? What's the process for an architect to be design an architecture? Well, the first thing we need to do is find out from the company's executives the vision and goals for their business. Where do they want to be now? Where do they want to be 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 5 years from now? And quite frankly, for the architectures that David and I do, even 20 years from now, our architectures are planting the seeds right now. Now, after we understand the organization's business goals, then we need to look at how the organization operates. How does the sales process occur? How is the product created if there's a product? How is the service delivered if it's a service? What does that organization's supply chain look like? How does that organization service their products, create customer service, create technical support? How does that business run? And we architects specifically need to look at the business processes, because here's the thing. That's called the business architecture that actually drives the business. And if we just pop technology into the business without understanding the business, there's a good chance we're going to actually hurt the business. So after we work with the executive team to find the vision for the business, and then we understand how the business operates, we architects are going to have to work with the client's executives and other key stakeholders to help redesign the optimal business processes. And then after we understand the way we want the business to operate in the future based upon the organization's goals, now we're going to go evaluate the organization's technology. What kind of technology? In today's world, the artificial intelligence that they have, their networking, their data center, their cloud technology, their applications, their security. And quite frankly, we might even get involved in the voice and the video systems, especially if we're dealing with unified communications. So now we understand the vision for the business and its goals and the business processes, and we've evaluated the technology. Now the architects are going to have to create and lead an architecture team. And this architecture team is going to be a big, multiple disciplinary team. Meaning if I'm the main cloud architect, I may have some application architects as part of my team, some security architects as part of my team, some network architects as part of my team, some identity and access management architects, and yes, that's separate from security, some data scientists on my team, some big data architects, some cloud engineers and DevOps engineers, because they're going to be much more technical than we architects are. And together, we're going to lead that team and we're going to craft a design that's going to optimize our client's business performance. Now, once we do that, in many cases, we're going to actually have to build the team or create the team that's going to implement it. And then at that point, typically speaking, unless we work for a vendor, we're going to actually build the team that's going to help govern the solution, the implementation of the solution, and any changes that need to occur. And then when we do that, we're going to be negotiating with various stakeholders across the organization to get their buy-in so they'll support the new systems. And of course, we're going to have to create a strategy around changes. So that's really what we do as actual architects. We're not system builders. We are not cloud engineers. And for the most part, we don't touch the organization's technology. Now, I know a lot of people have gotten confused, and the reason they've gotten confused is they've seen certifications which are all about configuring. That's not our job. But you can listen to David about it, you can listen to me about it, or I can read you what was in CIO magazine. And why do I like to go back to CIO magazine? Because there's all these engineers trying to tell people how to be architects, but engineers don't know what architects do. Does a nurse really know what a physician does? Not really, unless he or she has walked a mile in that physician's shoes. An engineer doesn't really know what we do as architects. And, we all know our own jobs. So what happened is that we've all seen some of these ridiculous, silly cloud architect job descriptions that have absolutely nothing to do with cloud architecture. So Gartner started polling organizations and asking the chief information officers, which is our boss, by the way, what do you want in a cloud architect? And here's what they said. We'd like someone that will lead the cultural change for cloud adoption, someone that can develop and coordinate a cloud architecture, someone that can develop a cloud strategy and coordinate the adoption process. Additionally, they said, find talent with the necessary skills, assess applications, hardware, and software, create a cloud broker team, establish best practices for cloud across the company, select cloud providers and vet third-party services, oversee governance and mitigate risk, work closely with the IT security people to monitor privacy and develop incident response procedures, and manage budgets and estimate costs and operate at scale. So I hope you could see with that, there's no hands-on, there's no coding, there's no sysops, there's no DevOps, there's no Python, there's no Linux in our world. We are systems designers. So keep that in the back of your mind. Now, why is it one of the most exciting times for cloud architects? Well, there's been a lot of recent advances in technology. Networking is getting much faster, and as networking got faster, it enabled us to distribute our technology in more places, hence cloud computing versus the local data center. Artificial intelligence has been around for a long period of time. The first AI systems I worked on were in around 2000. David's been working on them since the 80s, but AI's capabilities have gotten much better. The TPUs, the CPUs, the GPUs that can all, and the ASICs that can all run these calculations have gotten so fast that we can now do generative AI and so many new things. And where's most generative AI systems going to be? Either in a private cloud like an OpenStack or an Nutanix cloud, or the public cloud, driving more business to the actual cloud. Now, here's the most exciting thing. All of these technologies, when used correctly, can do tremendous things to enhance our clients' business performance. And it's our job to make sure that happens. If the cloud architect ties these technologies correctly to optimize our client's business, magic happens. Organizations earn more, their operating expenses go down, they're more efficient, their stock price goes up, their shareholders are happy. We did our job. What if I told you that more than most technology projects are disasters? What if I told you a recent article in CIO magazine said that basically 50+% of all cloud architectures are a disaster? McKinsey's data is that 70% of all technology projects are a disaster. That's why we need world-class cloud architects like David Lithicum, who understand the business requirements, understand the business goals, understand the business needs, and how to tune the business with technology. And we teach this to our students, and they work at Apple and Amazon and Cisco and Google and IBM and Microsoft and Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, because our architects know how to drive performance improvements. So If most architectures fail, it's the perfect opportunity for a great cloud architect to come to the rescue. We have a chance to re-architect all those disastrous architectures that have been out there. And most of these disastrous architectures came from people that thought they could be an architect and configure and build at the same time, meaning they focused on the technology and not the business. So there's more and more and more architect opportunities every day for people to actually optimize the business. So here's some even better news on why I love architecture careers. It's so human to human. For David and I to go design an architecture, we've got to walk into a client, we've got to meet people, we have to develop relationships, there's a bunch of schmoozing we need to do, there's lots of meetings we need to do, there's lots of facilitation of meetings we need to do, there's lots of vendor management and stakeholder management. And why do I love that? That can't be replaced by AI. Some back-end things like entry-level coding and writing Terraform scripts, which we don't do in our jobs, but writing Bash shell scripts in Linux, AI can do that. But AI cannot close $1 billion architecture, which we architects do all the time. AI can't manage stakeholders. So we're entering a world which requires both business skills and technology skills, and we can't be replaced by AI. And why it's even more exciting is every one of these new technologies that comes out, AI, for example, it creates more jobs because now companies say, I need an architect to design these systems. So we are increased by artificial intelligence. And sadly, some of the back-end engineering jobs can be automated or sent away. But not us, not as architects. We are very safe for this. So because of this, it is nearly impossible to find a great architect because we need tech skills, design skills, understanding of how the technology works, key leadership skills, and key interpersonal skills. And most people's idea of training is going on in hands-on building. And sadly, you don't learn how to design a bridge by building it. You don't learn how to design a shopping mall by picking up a hammer. And you don't learn how to design a cloud architecture by learning how to write a Python script. It's something totally different. So what are the cloud architect skills and why are we paid so much? It's the combination of executive skills and business skills and where we fit on the supply and demand curve. And what I mean by the supply and demand curve is if there's a lot of supply and limited demand, we don't get paid very much. But if there's extreme demand and almost no one that can fulfill the role, our salaries are high. You know, the average salary of a cloud architect is in that $200,000 range, but I know plenty of excellent cloud architects that earn $500,000 to $1 million a year, especially if they've got good business acumen and good leadership skills. We got a student last year, a $409,000 cloud architect job at Google, and it's not uncommon to see these kinds of things. So let's talk about the actual skills you need to be a great architect, and of course, we teach them all. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that 25 to 50% of the skills that you need are actually technical skills. 25 to 50%. And 50 to 75% of the skills, which are critically important, are actually business skills. That's right, business skills, not technical skills. In fact, after working with engineers that have 20 years experience that are fighting to become architects, and watching some of the most technical people in the world go on interviews and not clear an architecture interview, I'm going to start with the business skills because they're actually the most critical, especially if our job is to perform digital transformation. And what is digital transformation? Business optimization through the use of technology. So the first skill we need is something called CXO relevancy. And what does that actually mean? We have to understand the C-level suite's needs. What does that CEO care about, and how do we communicate how we can solve their challenges? What does that chief financial officer care about, and what can we do to impact that chief financial officer's job? What does that chief information officer care about, and what can we do? What does that chief operating officer care about, and what is it that we and our architectures can do to improve the operations of the business? So the first skill we need is actually CXO relevancy. The next skill we need is what's called business acumen or business knowledge. If our whole goal is to optimize our client's business, and all we know is tech, how do we optimize our client's business? Well, that's the equivalent of saying, how can I fly an airplane if I don't know how to fly the plane? The answer is we just can't. So you need business acumen, and we teach them. Now, I'm sure David will talk about it when he speaks a little bit later. You need really good leadership skills here. I promise you, no real architecture is designed by one person. It's not like, the techies try to make it when they go on YouTube and they say you're going to do this and you're just going to do this by yourself. No, an architecture takes a team. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. This is what we're talking about. It takes a team for every architecture. Typically speaking, most of the architectures I work on take at least 6 to 12 months to get all the requirements and design the architecture. And it typically takes a team of 10 to 50 people to actually design the architecture. So we need to lead the team. We need to build the team. So we're going to need leadership skills. Now, I'll tell you where most projects fail. It's the adoption of the technology. And the reason is the stakeholders don't buy in. So if I only work with one department and then I've got multiple business units in an organization and they say, I'm not going to use this technology, it doesn't matter what you put in there. It's not going to work because they're not going to use it. If you've got a car and you don't know how to drive it, it's not going to work. Well, if you can't get all the stakeholders across the organization to at least agree to accept and support the architecture, I promise you, it will fail. So these are some of the cloud architect business skills that you need, and we teach them all. Let's talk about the rest of them. Sales skills. Well, let's face it. If David or I want to do an architecture, we've got to convince people to come work on our team. And you see Chow, she's that nice smiley person over there in the upper left-hand corner on the screen. She's waving right now. If I say, Chow, you're on my team and you must do this, Chow will say, okay. And then she'll find a new job in about a week and a half and she won't help me with my architecture whatsoever. So we've got to convince people to want to work with us. And that's going to come from both selling and good sales skills. When I need 15 different technology professionals that each cost $200,000 a year, I have to sell my internal management to give them to me and build a business case as to why. And I can have the most beautiful billion-dollar architecture that's going to solve world hunger. And if I can't convince the client to buy the architecture and adopt it, it's a 300-page pretty architecture document with a lot of pretty pictures in it, but it's not going to go anywhere. So we have to be able to sell. And the good news is the better we sell, the more we earn. Because our bonus to some degree has to deal with the volume of sales either in our region or in our business or something like that. The next critical skill we must have is communication skills. Nobody hands you a piece of paper and says, build this. We don't build anything as architects. We've got to go in there and find about the organization's goals, find out about the technology. And the reality is in most of the architectures we're going to deal with, the client actually messed up. Things aren't the way they're supposed to be. And we have to have a level of softness and finesse where we get the information from the client so we can do our jobs. So strong communication skills. The next thing are presentation skills. You know what the last phase of a cloud architect interview generally is? Presentation. You know what happens to the people with the best tech skills that are all hands-on that don't know how to present? They fail the presentation interview. But guess what? As architects, we present all the time. I bet you David presents 300 times a year, all over the place, presenting to executives, presenting to stakeholders, presenting to technology people, presenting at conferences. So we're going to be presenting every single day. And the next thing we have to have is something called executive presence. Watch. Hi, my name's Mike Gibbs. I'm a cloud architect. Now, you're not going to listen to me like that, and the executives won't take me seriously. But if I say, I'm Mike Gibbs, and I'm a cloud architect, and I've worked in technology now for a quarter of a century, people are going to take me serious, and that's called executive presence. You must get training in this. We provide training in this. Sad reality is I have about $20,000 of training in this that Cisco put me through so I could be a better architect. And the other key components that you're going to need to have are going to be vendor management. I promise you, 99% of the time, you're not going to walk in and just take all the AWS services that they talk about in a certification. Your security systems are going to be coming from a Palo Alto or a Checkpoint or a Fortinet, for example. You may have some voice systems in there from a Cisco or a Avaya. You're going to have databases that aren't going to be the cloud providers' databases. We're going to be dealing with so many vendors, hundreds in the reality in many instances. Now, we have to negotiate constantly. Negotiate with stakeholders, negotiate sales. You're going to need good, strong negotiation skills. And of course, you're going to need a soft touch and some emotional intelligence along the way. Those are the critical business skills you have. You have to have them. If you don't have them, you can be potentially an engineer, but you're not going to be able to be hireable as an architect. No, but you still need technical skills. But I want to make it clear, this is not a hands-on position. It's not about your hands-on skills, as you won't be touching the technology as a cloud architect, and in most organizations, you wouldn't even be allowed to. But you need to know how the technology works versus how to build the technology. And they're so not the same. You could build all day long and still not know how the technology works. How many of you have a PC and are using one right now? Oh, you know how to use your PC, right? You know how to install a program, you know how to install your operating system if it's kept corrupted. Okay, that's hands-on engineering skills. How many of you know about the level 1, level 2, and level 3 cache on your CPU, what it actually does? How many of you understand the way the CPU interfaces with the PCIe bus? How many of you understand how DRAM is actually injected into the memory? How many of you understand the operating system's kernel and how it manages processes and how it schedules things? That you have to learn. That's architecture knowledge. You need to understand the underlying technology and how it works. And sadly, you can't learn it by building stuff. The same way you can't learn how to design a building by swinging a hammer. So we will teach you how the underlying technology works. And whether you train with us or you train somewhere else, you need to learn underlying technology. And then you need to learn how to apply the pieces and put them together in a manner that is going to enable you to improve business performance. Of course, you also need to understand how to design the technology and designing for business needs, whether that means the business performance needs, financial concerns, availability, security concerns. This means you need knowledge on a wide range of systems. So what kind of knowledge do you need from a technical perspective? Of course, we teach all of it. You'll need network design skills, because if they don't have a network or the network's bad, it all falls apart. Imagine building a house on sand. All of a sudden you get a rainstorm and the whole house falls down. Well, I got to tell you, in 25 years as an architect, I've seen people that didn't know networking that designed their cloud systems wrong and their enterprise systems wrong from an IP addressing part and a network perspective, and it all falls down like the nursery rhyme for children. So you will need network design skills, and they mean knowing what kind of wide area network technology to use. Some examples would be a private line versus a VPN connection versus a SASE WAN versus a software-defined WAN. You will need to know how to plan the IP addresses. It's the equivalent of planning the roads. You will need to understand how to plan the routing and routing protocols such as BGP and how they work. You will need to understand compute. What do I mean by compute? I mean servers and server virtualization, and I mean containers and container orchestration. I even mean functions as a service, things like Lambda functions or Azure functions, or functions on a Nutanix cloud or an OpenStack cloud. And of course we teach this, you will need to have good knowledge of storage area networks. Things like block storage, object storage, and file storage. And because block storage is relatively slow performance, regardless of what you've been taught inside of a certification, how do you work around that? Things like RAID, or things like using, say, NetApp on FSx for Lustre. What are your options when you need higher performance? And of course, you will need security design skills, and we teach them. Things like, how do you design your demilitarized zones? What kind of a security policy do you need? What kind of training do the employees need, for example? What type of data loss prevention strategies are going to need? You're going to need next generation firewalls, IDS, IPS systems, VPN concentrators. We teach this. You're also going to need big data skills. Things like how would you create a data lake? What kind of mapping and reductions need to occur? What kind of data hygiene needs to occur? And of course, you need to know cloud design skills. What do you design a single cloud versus a hybrid cloud versus a hybrid multi-cloud? And the reality is now you need artificial intelligence skills, and of course we teach them all. So let's talk about certifications. I'm going to make it very clear to you. There's no such thing as an architect certification, none. There's a whole bunch of certifications on learning vendor names and how to configure them. But guess what? We don't configure anything as architects. So all these certifications are really systems admin or cloud admin certifications. But does that mean we shouldn't get them? No. And I'll tell you why we get them and why we use them. The certifications are great for brand building. It's kind of like putting wrapping paper on a gift that you got someone you care about. You put nice wrapping paper on it, you put a bow on it, it looks really good. But let's say you wanted to sell your car. If you just went mudding and you got mud on your car, would you sell your car, or would you take it and have it washed, have it waxed, look really good, and then try to sell it for more money? That's what I would do. So this is why we do certifications. And in our program, we recommend 3 certifications and we teach them all. We recommend either the AWS Solutions Architect Professional or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert. It doesn't teach you architecture, but it looks real good and it creates the illusion of competency, and that's often enough to get you an interview. And then what we teach you will get you hired. We also like TOGAF, and we teach the TOGAF 10. And why do I like TOGAF? Because it doesn't have any vendors in there. It's not going to bias you to buy an AWS versus an Azure thing. And it's going to give you the focus of start with the business, then the business processes, et cetera, et cetera. And again, it looks good on a resume, so we teach it. I'm actually a fan of the CISSP. And the CISSP is an architecture-related security certification. And it talks about risk and availability and security and managing risk and quantifying risk. And we teach those three because that's kind of like the perfect architect portfolio. We could do a networking certification versus the CISSP if you're interested in cloud networking, but we like 2 or 3 and no more. Now let's talk about our training. Our training is going to be everything you need to be a great cloud architect and get started. We do live training on Zoom 3 days per week, so you can actively participate in our architectural discussions. We'll do architectural projects on these things. We will respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, just like real architects do in the real world. My architects will deliver presentations. They will learn to sell. It is fun. And I teach so many of these classes. I'm teaching another one today, and I just love teaching architecture classes. But I'm not the only one that teaches architecture classes. I've got 2 PhD business school professors that come in, 3 MBAs, working application architects that come in here, working AI architects that come in, working cloud security architects that come in, working enterprise architects, because it's not enough just to hear from one person. My architecture team has people that have hundreds of years of architecture experience to make sure you learn. So live classes 3 days per week. And you know what else we do? We have office hours a couple days a week. And here's what you can do. You can come in on office hours and ask questions about the program. And my team is there to support you. See, basically almost every day, you've got an opportunity to have live something with our staff. Now, when we teach these classes, 2 of them are tech focused. And 1 of them is leadership, business acumen, executive focused. Because we have to give you the skills, both business and technical, to be successful. Now, I mentioned we've got live classes 3 days per week. So what happens in between these live classes? Well, we will watch videos, we have required reading, we have assignments, you'll practice your interviews because we've got some questions for your interviews, you'll build customized career plans which will work on you, you'll be turning in your resume and my team can give you feedback. Literally speaking, you will do work and we will give you feedback. And why do we do feedback? Because you could just watch videos on your own, but you don't know if you're doing it right. You don't know if you're getting better. You need a coach. So there's some integrated coaching in that by the feedback, by everything we do. We will teach you how to build your brand. We will teach you how to tune your resume. We'll teach you how to tune your LinkedIn profile. We will teach you how to interview, and we will even teach you how to negotiate a higher salary. You know, I had a student that used our salary negotiation techniques and negotiated an additional $40,000 over the salary they gave him in the first place, which is pretty good for a course which cost, you know, $2,500 at full price, $1,250 on sale, to negotiate an additional $40,000 plus getting a $200,000 job that you wouldn't have been qualified to get in the first place. I think that's a pretty good return on investment. So we will help you build a career that you love, a career that comes with the respect and the paycheck that will support your goals and dreams. So I'd say join our architect program and your career, but I'd like to turn it over to David, let him speak for a few minutes about the cloud architect role. And then after that, you can ask questions of David and I'd love to answer any questions you have. Don't be shy. You can come on you can come on video. You can pop in the chat box. We can have a conversation. If you think you're ready for a job, either David or I could give you a mini interview and see. So, David, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I love the discussion around architecture and the role of architecture, which is absolutely vital to building these systems. So becoming an AI architect, or in this case, a generative AI architect, is going to have very much of the same patterns. And so you're a hybrid person, you have the leadership capabilities, ability to deal with stakeholders. We're just targeted for building something is a little bit more specific instead of looking at cloud computing in general, which is going to host multiple applications and data sets and different workloads and different hybrid clouds and multi-clouds and all the kind of complexities that comes along with that. we're looking at the value of a technology which is targeted at creating an innovative differentiator for the business. So normally the AI architect is going to come in at the request of the board of directors, at request of the CIO, at the request of a high level that they looking to leverage this kind of technology in a certain way to take their business to the next level. Now, the architect has kind of a very specific role in the fact that we're going to look at the business benefits of the generative AI system, look at the requirements, and look at what technology is going to be aligned for their particular needs. So the idea and the core focus of what a generative AI architect does is the ability to maximize the value that this technology is able to bring back to the business by understanding the business in a good amount of detail, by getting a team involved, looking at the pragmatic use of this technology, what type of systems need to be built to return the maximum value to the business, and therefore, and also the technology configuration, the data configuration, the security configuration, governance, networking, all that kind of stuff just kind of comes into play. So there's common patterns between cloud architect, AI architect, network architect, security architect, all those different folks out there. They're making core decisions around what technology patterns should be leveraged. Now, notice I didn't say technology. This is not something where you come in and, it's funny, I was just looking at some LinkedIn job posts where they're looking for an architect, but they want you to have a specific skill in a particular AI technology. That means they're not looking for that. Yeah, ultimately, those are open questions as you come in and make the architectural decisions. In other words, the business is telling you what they want the system to do. Normally, it's going to be to being leveraged as a force multiplier to bring lots of value back to the business, by providing something innovative they can hang their hat on, a la, use of Uber with AI, things like that, and, different systems that are out there. So it's your responsibility to do a few things. In other words, understand the business, put your hat on, communicate with the stakeholders, communicate with people they report to, communicate with people they report to, communicate with people they report to really become a de facto expert in what that business is. And that doesn't mean you have to understand everything about finance or everything about healthcare, but you have to understand enough so you can translate the business needs into a set of requirements to tell your team, in this case, AI engineers, data scientists, AI ethicists, that's a big part of the team, even the network engineers and security engineers, specialized group of people as to what they need to be defining and what they need to be building. Now, they're the ones who take the higher level, what I call the meta architecture, and then break that down into the micro architecture. The micro architecture is, in essence, applying technology to the particular problem that we're looking to solve. Now, notice that that's a handoff. That's something that you oversee, but that's not something you do. The only way to be successful as an architect, and Mike alluded to this a lot, and I think it's absolutely true, is to get your detailed work done through other people, your ability to manage a team, your ability to manage resources, your ability to be a good leader, your ability to see things through, but also have enough understanding about what those people are doing so you can ask the right questions. So you're not going to be a person who is so business focused, they're not going to have an understanding of the technology, or so technology focused, they don't have an understanding of the business. You need to be both, which is why architects make so much, because it's very difficult to find people who are willing to dedicate their career to becoming good at both aspects of this. In my coming up, I was very technically focused, had to become very business focused, even parlayed that into a job as a CEO and a couple of other positions, things like that. And you need to kind of keep in mind that you need to have an open mind, you need to be a continuous learner, and you need to have three main legs of a stool: the ability to communicate, the ability to understand the business, and the ability to understand the use of technology. And if any of those aren't there, then you're not going to be a successful architect. And I know a lot of architects, and certainly in this space, and people who write books and do webinars and things like that, they focus on one leg, but not the other. So they focus on their technology expertise. They don't focus on their ability to communicate, and they don't focus on their understanding of the business, and they just miss the mark. So they build something that the business thinks they need, doesn't necessarily need, doesn't have some sort of a business value, doesn't have the metrics in terms of the ROI it's going to return back to the business. And there's a disconnect between what the stakeholders, the people who are paying you to ask you to do, and what you're absolutely designed to deliver. Now, that becomes a huge issue. And I think that's a big problem right now. I just wrote an article last week for InfoWorld, actually, I'm sorry, in LinkedIn, where I talked about how we're in essence making very similar architectural mistakes that we made in the early days of cloud now with AI. So unfortunately, I don't think we've learned a lot. When you're going to have a lot of architects who had the discipline to go through a class like this, and it doesn't matter if you're a PhD or you just get out of high school, you need to work through the processes and how you're going to get the understanding, get the knowledge on how you make all this stuff work. And therefore, there's a deficit between them understanding the business, doing an architecture with an open mind, and then picking the right solutions. If you notice in 2024, and there was a UK study that was just done by Citrix, almost half the companies out there are in some sort of a repatriation movement. So in other words, what happened was they didn't really have a good architecture, or they didn't have normally that means they didn't have a good architect. And they made mistakes in trying to make a mad rush into the cloud without an understanding in terms of what the pitfalls were in doing that. In other words, the upsides and the downsides for taking workloads and data and moving it into the cloud. So we had this huge lift and shift movement that occurred, over the last 10 years. And suddenly we realized that these applications that were under-architected and under-optimized that were running on a public cloud platform were costing the business way too much money. As I put in my book, it's normally 2.5 times what people thought they were going to spend in the cloud is what they spend in the cloud. That's unacceptable. That's a failure. And that's a failure at a huge scale. And that you trace a lot of those things back, and I worked through them, lots of times when I was a consultant. It comes back to bad architecture and just kind of making bad decisions. They never hired a key individual who had a team of people to go off and assist them in making decisions. And so they did what I call architecture by conference. So they went to reInvent, they went to Google, they went to the Google Cloud Show, they went to the Microsoft Cloud Show, and in essence copied whatever they were saying as to what their solutions were going to be. Or they did what's called architecture by magazine. I know we don't read magazines anymore, but they move after a particular hype-driven stuff. So they move after serverless and containers and all this other stuff, which is viable options when you're an architect. They're great technology, but they need to be used in certain contexts and not in other contexts. So there's a huge disparity between organizations that need that kind of expertise and then organizations that have that kind of expertise. The majority of situations and problem domains out there, even if they have an architect on staff, whether it's an IT architect, security architect, cloud architect, and in this case, AI architect, are not making the right decisions. And I think the fundamental problem with that is there really is no sound architecture training that you get in colleges and universities. And so they're getting the technical training, they're getting some basic programming, they're getting some basic database theory, networking theory, things like that. But the ability to kind of bring all these things together becomes a skill that some people develop, like Mike and myself and others out there, and some people don't. And you're finding that they have the same job. Everybody's hiring the same people to do these sorts of things, and that's where the failure occurs. So moving forward, this is about developing a special skill. This is about opening your mind to different skills and technology and stepping up to the plate and understanding that we need to do lots of things fairly well, but we don't need to do everything. In fact, becoming an architect is not only the ability to understand what your role is, it's your ability to say no. In other words, your ability not to get involved with some of the detailed stuff and your ability not to get so down into the details that you're jumping down a rabbit hole each and every time we're looking to make a technology decision. I understand it's very fun to talk about LLM development and utilization of RAG-based application approaches, and that's all well and good, but those are normally in the domain of the engineers and how they carry that out. And the reason we're doing that because those people have specialized skills to make it happen. If they don't, you hire the wrong people.
Exactly.
You're there to make sure it gets done. You're there to make sure that that particular aspect of the system integrates all the other various aspects of the system, and we're able to map that back into some sort of advantage that the business is able to take. That's your role. And your definition of success is the ability to create unoptimized architecture, which is going to maximize the amount of value that comes back to the business. That's it. I don't think people are considering that as much out there. And so we need to get better at this, as I wrote in the article. Back to you, Mike.
I agree with everything David said. Now, David pivoted to AI architecture, which is great because we have an AI architecture course, which actually David developed. In the context of cloud architecture, and I'll let David comment on this. The way you typically see it is the top of the food chain, you're going to have either an enterprise architect or a cloud architect, and they're going to be focused on everything. And in a theoretical world, every architect is focused on everything. But the closer we are to a specialty, the more we focus on that particular technology than everything. So if you could look at it this way, you got the cloud architect that's responsible for it all. They're responsible for the private cloud, the public cloud, and everything that sits on that cloud. The AI, the data science, the servers, the containers, the storage, what have you. And underneath them, they're going to have specialty architects, network architects who focus more on the network, still in the context of digital transformation, security architects that focus on the security in the context of digital transformation, AI architects who focus on the AI. And quite frankly, I think every cloud architect needs to know AI, because the reality is that's half of the reason people are going to the cloud, and vice versa. Would you agree with that, David?
I'd absolutely agree with that. And I think there's overlap between the two disciplines.
Yes.
Because as we start building out AI infrastructure, and I go over this in my videos and in the class, we have to focus on the platforms that are going to be built on. And the majority of the time, it's going to be on cloud-based systems. So you have to kind of put on a cloud architect hat and play a dual role and understand how to deal with resources and storage and types of storage and performance on those systems, things like that. So there's some cross disciplines there. But the core message here is that we're dealing with technology at a strategic level, not at a tactical level. And that's a completely different understanding. If you're a cloud architect, you're dealing with the cloud technology, again, at a strategic level. And if you're an AI architect, you're dealing with technology at a strategic level, which may include cloud and, of course, security architecture and network architecture, all these sorts of things. But you're playing the common role where we're not focused on the details. We're not focused on the implementation of the system. We leave that to other folks. We're focused on the configuration of the technology and the ability to achieve a strategic direction with that. And my core point I was trying to make, there's not enough people focused on that. There's not enough people sitting through these classes, not enough people becoming a self-learner to get to a point where we're able to make those capabilities, able to make that leap. Right now, there's a shortage of cloud architects. There's a shortage of AI architects. There's a shortage of network architects. And the cloud architecture side, because I played that role for so long, best I can tell, we have 10 open job recs that are chasing one qualified candidate. Yep. And so therefore, a lot of it, and this is how we got in trouble in the early days of cloud, they're hiring people that are underskilled or underqualified for those roles. In some instances, they can't pick the people that are qualified or not. And they end up making wrong decisions. And that's why we're fixing a lot of those wrong decisions now. And so you would think we should learn from those things, but right now I still see it as being a deficit out there in the marketplace. We don't have enough people that are really to understand the ins and outs of becoming a cloud architect, the skills that need to be applied there. How do you go through the processes? And everybody's out there managing by magazine, managed by conference, and doing some of the things that I think I understand why they're doing it, because there's a lack of understanding. There's no one book you can get that tells you how to be a good architect for a particular situation. But it's going to get us in trouble very quick, very much like we did with cloud computing. So unless we're able to build the cloud skills, build the cloud computing architects we need, we're not necessarily going to have the foundations of the skill levels that are fundamental to being successful with this stuff. And I think right now we're paying way too much for these solutions because we don't have the architects in place that are making the right decisions around utilization of cloud resources.
Exactly. We don't have the right architects. One of my students and your students, David, a really smart person, actually attended the AWS generative AI training in addition to your cloud architect training or AI architect training. He goes to the conference and training and he comes back and he says, Amazon suggests that we have a cloud first AI approach. Well, that's the whole problem right then and there. It's already a bias. They're teaching you that your AI should be on the cloud. Maybe it should be in your data center. Maybe it should be on your cloud. We should have a customer-focused approach, a customer's interest, and not worry about technology, not worry about a brand, not worry where it should be. Imagine a doctor being trained that says we should have a Pfizer medication first approach. and start with Pfizer medications and forget everything else that actually exists out there. So let's see, there's some questions in there. Ask your questions. Like I said, we have a cloud architect program, an enterprise architect program, and an AI architect program. And if you're in our cloud architect program, it's a simple bundle add-on that for a low cost to join the AI architect program as well. And some of my students actually come and train 5 days a week, 3 days with me, 2 days with David, and they get the best of everything that way. So let's get into your questions. Ask them. Don't be shy. David and I don't bite.
All right, gentlemen. Well, I am going to consolidate. It seems like Vaibhav, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, has a series of questions that I'd like to get ahead of. So the first question, gentlemen, is going to be: weekly live classes are scheduled on weekday mornings. I may have work more meetings at that time. I want to understand how existing enrolled members are managing to attend class work hours.
Okay, that's a great question, and I'll address this, and I'll tell you why we pick these times. Our students live in every country you could possibly imagine. I'd say 80% of our students live between North America, South America, England, Europe, and Africa. That's about 80%. So no matter what time we pick, it's never going to be a good time. The 10 a.m. the people in India love. Oh, I can take this. And when we move it later in the afternoon or evening, then we get people in India that say, I can't take it. So, we're always going to run into a time where it's never the best time. But I'm going to make it very clear. 80% of our students work full-time. 80%. And we record absolutely every class. So if you miss one, just watch the class recording. It's no big deal. What a lot of students do that work full-time is they pop into maybe 1 hour of the class. When they can, they watch the remaining recording. They've got some questions. They pop into class. They ask some questions. They watch the remaining of the class recording. But 80% of our students are here full-time. And here's the secret. We don't rush you. And here's what I mean by this. We are the anti-boot camp. I personally hate boot camps. Here's what a boot camp is. You come in 16 weeks later, you're out of here. Get out. And whether you're hired, you're not hired, you have the skills, you don't have the skills, that boot camp kicks you out. Not us. You can stay on our training until you're hired. So if it takes you 12 months, who cares? If it takes you 6 months, great. If you need to spend 14 months in the program, you've got access to a year of the live classes, unlimited in the non-live part, and we keep adding the recordings to it every week, you're going to be great. So we don't rush you. You stay in the program until you're hired. So the only way you don't get hired is if you don't do the work and you quit on yourself.
Well said. Well said. The next question also will be, what is the duration of class and what part of it is technical and professional development?
So we have 2 classes per week that are technical and 1 class that is professional development. The classes are typically 2 hours each. And there's about 700 hours of content that you could do on your own to go through and watch the previous 3 years of recordings. We want you to become great. Now, I will tell you, most of our students get hired before they finish the entire curriculum. But, thing is, it's there and it gets better. Each week, there's 6 additional hours added to the curriculum, minimum.
Okay. And what would that duration, the total duration of average time a student goes through to be successful, Mike?
Well, that all depends on the average student and how fast they learn and how many things they have going on in their job. Perfect example is I can read 1,000 pages a day and remember them. I can. Now, if you ask me to do math, I can't do it at all. In fact, my wife does all the math and I do all the reading and summarize it because we each have our own strength. I don't know how fast you learn. I would say average in a normal economy is approximately 8 to 12 months. When the economies slow down, as all business cycles do, it may take a little longer. When the economies heat up and organizations are less selective, it typically takes less time. But about 8 to 12 months is pretty normal.
This question that he has, or they have, is specific to the Generative AI Architect Development Program. Are there any prerequisites, David, such as programming in Python and other similar languages that we need to have?
No, not at all. And that actually may be easier for you to understand things conceptually if you're not if you don't have a foundation in particular technology. You'll find that when people, and I found this out when I was a consultant, when you're working with them, they come to the team with certain biases. In other words, they're an AWS engineer, security engineer, or they're a Microsoft security engineer, and they kind of think everything in that light. So more we can shape your understanding from the ground up and think about architecture from the ground up versus from how you used a particular programming language, I think the better off you're going to be. I've noticed that for years. It used to, and by the way, my understanding has changed. I used to tell people they should get a foundation in development before they move into architecture, but I saw so many successful architects out there that learn the foundation of architecture and the ability to kind of break that down to understanding the technology. And that seems to be a better direction.
Yep.
So it's top down versus bottom up. And if you want to go top down, which means you show up without any kind of technical skills, skills per se, other than the desire to learn, I think you're going to be able to grasp the understanding of what we're doing faster.
Yeah, and I want to hit the coding piece. Not I speak Greek at home, so if I said to Alonzo, "Εχθές έφαγα κότα με σαλάτα," that's another language, right? And Chal speaks Vietnamese, and Alonzo speaks Japanese, and Mohammed, I'm pretty sure, speaks Arabic, who's here. And the point is, that's just learning another language. What are we really working with? We're working with data center components, servers, server virtualization, GPUs, TPUs, storage area networks, not code. So learning code is no different than learning another language. I promise you, and Chal's a great architect, but the fact that she speaks Vietnamese is not going to teach her how to design an end-to-end enterprise-grade solution. Neither will Python. So Python will teach you how to do hands-on engineering coding, which is not our job. And sometimes, in my experience, I've seen things very similar to David. I've trained engineers with 20 years experience, and I've trained nurses and doctors and pharmacists. Sometimes if you don't have the technology basis, you're not bogged down by the bad habits of thinking about the technology. You're thinking about how to just become an architect. And I used to see nurses when they become nurse practitioners. For those of you that are outside the US, you wouldn't hear of a nurse practitioner, but a nurse practitioner is someone that's got a nursing degree, goes to school and get for a couple more years, it's 7 years total, and can write a prescription, do minor surgery, those kinds of things. And I used to see the people that used to be nurses for a long period of time before they became nurse practitioners, they struggled because they were so used to that hands-on nursing, and all of a sudden they got to be a doctor and they don't know how. They kept falling back on their old job. So sometimes I've found that people, when they don't have the coding experience, actually do a lot better.
Great explanation, gentlemen. This one is going to be from Mohammed, and he has a total of 2 questions. To whom convince them first for business solutions, either technical teams or C-level management, or both to approve solutions? Okay, so I guess he's asking, who do we have to convince for these solutions, the technical or C-level management?
C-suite people have the money. The technical people have no money. The technical people can say no, so we got to make them say yes. The C-suite people can give you the $1 billion. So the C-suite people are the people that matter.
They're the ones who cut the checks. The next question: is there a time frame for business solutions for with customers to do business assessments for their requirements with all other departments? What's the minimum time frame?
I'll take that. There is no minimum time frame.
Yep.
In other words, you do it until it's done. And
Yep.
so, sometimes it's going to, now you do have contracts that you have to adhere to, and you have to make profit on the contract. So there's some business issues there. But certainly if you're a staff architect, in other words, you're working for the company where you're building the architect, you take as long as you desire to take to understand the requirements. And there should be no deadlines for that. In fact, you'll find that sometimes people try to hamstring you into some sort of a box. And the reality is you don't know what you don't know. And when you start peeling back the onion on what core processes are, what their security requirements are, performance requirements, the needs of the application, what the stakeholders are needing, what strategic advantage can you have, you're going to have to extend that or contract it based on the amount of time you need to do that. In fact, the primary mistake that people make, I think, on these things, as I saw some of these things derail over the years, is that they don't spend enough time on the requirement side, because that's where they can decide to cut some of the cost to get more profit from the contractor, to get more budget in case you're working for the company as well. And in doing that, you're missing 80% of what you need to be doing. And you notice that when we teach architecture classes, a lot of it's toward the business, a lot of it's toward to understand the requirements, communicating with the stakeholders, doing things that are very non-technical. And your ability to get that right is foundational to your ability to create a good solution. It's going to have good value to the business. So I would let the architect determine how much time is needed, obviously within certain parameters, but that's a decision you don't have laymen make.
Yes,
Sense.
great answer. If you've got questions, please ask them. But yeah, the assessment piece is probably the most critical component, because if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know what the real needs are, anything you architecture is most likely going to be wrong. It's like a clock. Yes, it's right twice a day if it's broken, because it'll say 12 o'clock twice a day. But we don't want to leave it to chance. We want to get it there. If you've got some career questions, ask us. You've got, between David and I, we've got 60 years architect experience. We really want to help you.
You guys need to take advantage of this. One question that I believe I see is this going to be a continuous program, or is there a duration or an end time or end date?
This is a continuous program. All of our programs are continuous. Here's the thing. The average cloud architect earns $1,000 a day, average. Many earn much more. The average AI architect earns at least $1,000 a day. Some earn much more. If I were to make you wait 2 months to take our program, to do a batch, we'd have two problems. One is you'd lose a minimum of $40,000 of earnings, which I don't think is a good idea for anyone. And then I'd have to say after 20 weeks, get out of here, you're done, the boot camp's over. I want to keep you in our program until the day you're hired. So here's the way we do it. The online pieces of our programs are self-contained and very self-paced. Very self-contained. And then the online projects and things we typically do, we typically repeat them periodically again and again. So in the process, here's ultimately what we're talking about. You stay in the program, no matter when you enter, no matter when you exit. And by exit, I mean you are hired. You should be getting everything you need.
Awesome. Next question. Will the Generative AI Architect Development Program cover basics of architecture?
It'll cover
Yeah.
more than the basics.
Of course. Obviously, we're making you from the ground up an architect. And so I'm considering you coming to the program cold. But of course, we have people that are coming, they're network engineers, they're even an AI engineer and data scientists, things like that. They know different aspects about it. But we have to teach you the foundations of architecture. And so there's going to be some common patterns that we're going to find between cloud architecture and AI architecture, even network architecture and security architecture. But it's teaching you from the ground up how you approach this as an AI architect and the stepwise things you need to go through and the things you need to understand. So it's building you from the ground up to become an architecture so you can go out there and make some money, but most importantly, have a lot of fun. It's a great job to have.
You all think about what's going on in this program. This is a trailblazing program with David Linthicum. He's been doing and having access and exposure to AI since the 80s. So you couple that with what we know in an agnostic architecture, being able to look at the full expanse of architecture and apply the layer of generative AI on top of that. That valuation, I cannot stress, it is something that you can't put a number on outside of what you're going to get in a salary, and would highly encourage anyone to participate. I love coming to that class. I love seeing what's happening, the dynamics, the questions that people are asking, and what David is sharing in that environment. You won't be able to see that in any other space. So I digress. I love talking about this. I love the excitement. I love being here talking with these gentlemen. So this next question is going to be from Chijekwu. Some of us here in Africa have some challenges in the cloud jobs that are not available, and the remote opportunities are always difficult. I am in Nigeria, so do you guys promise getting jobs for us that are remote?
So let's talk about promising somebody can do something. I can't promise that you show up for class, and I mean this in the most respectful sort of way. I can't promise that you do our work. So how could I guarantee something that's based upon you? That's why Oxford, Harvard, Yale, Cambridge, they can't have a guarantee that you'll get a job when you finish your PhD at these schools, despite having a good name. What we can do is give you the best training and let you stay in our training until the day you are hired. So there's that. Now, have I gotten people hired in Africa? Absolutely. I've gotten lots of people hired in South Africa. I've gotten some people hired in Nigeria as well, specifically in the Lagos area. So the answer is yes. I also have students such as, I don't know if you guys saw Benedict in our network architecture in our AWS Advanced Networking training last week. He was living in Lagos, now he lives in Canada. So the answer is there are opportunities in Africa, they are much harder. South Africa will give you your best bang for your buck in terms of job opportunities, with Nigeria a close second. I also have employees that I've trained that actually live in Africa. For example, Tyrone is not on this call. He lives in South Africa. Eddie Kem, who's wonderful. He lives in Bamenda, Cameroon. And a lot of times I like to hire our students that are actually in Africa if they're really great, because I just love working with people from Africa. So motivated, so caring, and so, the desire to work and the desire to learn, and so many other wonderful good things. So, there are opportunities in Africa. There are more than you think. AWS is investing heavily in that Nigeria and Cameroon area. So there are opportunities, but it is a harder market. And I tell people, when you're in Africa and we train them, do our work and study all day, every day that you possibly can, because, that's how you be good, because there's such a limited supply of people that are capable in the world. David or I could interview 500 people and not find a single architect. They get 50 certifications each. And we ask them one architect question, and they know how to code, they know how to configure, but they can't answer a single architecture question. So I hope that makes sense.
Okay, gentlemen, the next question I would love to hear from both of you. How important are certifications?
Well, here's what I consider certifications: bait to get you an interview. Now, I'll give you an example from my background, Claire. So, Claire, what job are you looking for? Because the job you are looking for is more dependent upon the certification. But I'll tell you what I did in the beginning, Claire. So I used to be practicing internal medicine, and hopefully you can tell me which job you want. And when I decided to move into tech 25 years ago, here's what I did. I got 6 certifications. And they weren't little simple certifications. They were things like the Cisco Certified Network Professional, the Cisco Certified Design Professional, the Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer. Each one of these are about 3 to 5 times more challenging than the AWS Solutions Architect Professional. I sent out resumes, and you know what happened? Not a single employer cared about any of the certifications that I ever had. I then spoke to about 50 recruiters, and they told me what hiring managers desired in the perfect network engineer, which is what I was looking for at the time. I then learned everything they were, and I went on my first network engineer interview when I was hired as a senior engineer and was promoted to lead architect within 3 months. So, Claire, it's not about your certifications, it's about your knowledge. Let me tell you what certifications from AWS will teach you, like an AWS Solutions Architect Professional, and then I'll have David comment. The name of an AWS service, which if you try to use an AWS service name in front of a chief information officer, they'll escort you out of the room from using a bunch of brand-related jargon, and how to configure that service. And do you know what we don't do, Claire, as architects? We don't use the name of those services. We talk about block storage versus EBS, and we don't configure anything. That's the job of the cloud admin, the cloud engineer, or the DevOps engineer. So there is no education that you're going to get in any AWS certification that will prepare you to be an architect. Having said that, it will help you get an interview. And that's why I mentioned we teach the AWS Solutions Architect Professional, the TOGAF 10, and typically the CISSP, only to get you the interview. And it's what we teach you that's going to get you the job. I will also tell you, and then I want to hear what David said, that when I worked for Cisco, and I have the hardest certification in the world to pass, the CCIE. On average, it costs between $20,000 to $40,000 to pass that certification. It has an 80 to 90% failure rate, and I have it. And when I was at Cisco, my manager, who was a VP when I was a lead architect for an entire vertical, he says, Michael, he says, could you remove that CCIE from your business card? Could you remove that CISSP from your business card? He said, keep your MBA. He said, I don't want people to see you as a techie. I want to see you as an executive. So please get rid of all those certification mumbo jumbo on your business cards. I did. And within a year, I had a 6-figure raise because people started to see me differently and I had a bigger impact. I closed more deals. So keep that in the back of your mind. Yes, I want you to get them, but no, they won't help you. At least that's my perspective. But David, you've been training people, working with people for decades too. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, if you get a tactical certification, which is what AWS certs are, or Microsoft certs are, and Google certs are, it'll get you to a tactical job. It's not going to get you to an architect job. It will be a way to open the door and get your feet into some sort of an entry-level employment. I've had lots of people who went through a lot of the AWS certifications, were able to parlay that into AWS jobs to do admin, operations, things like that. But as far as becoming an architect, I don't think it helps you at all. In fact, it would be a concern to me if someone came to me looking for an architect position and they had 10 certifications in a particular cloud provider, because guess what? That's going to be a bias that I'm going to have to exercise out of that person. I may even pass on them to get somebody who doesn't have the certifications, so I can form them and build them and get them thinking strategically, tactically in an unbiased way. This is not about a single vendor solution. And we have so many people out there that do that. AWS, if you go there for anything architect, they're not going to teach you architecture. They're just going to teach you how to use their resource, their technology in a certain way. I understand why they're doing that, and they're doing things that are to their own advantage. But to your advantage as a human being out there trying to get a job, if you're trying to get a job as an architect, that's normally something I wouldn't worry about. And less what Mike says, you can get interviews leveraging that technology and get your foot into the door. If you want to work for an organization, you can come in using that venue. But as far as it goes to credit in architecture, it's not very meaningful to me.
David said something is very essential there, and it's critical that everybody hears it. If you have too many certifications from AWS, it will bias you to think towards AWS things. If you have too many certifications from Google, it will bias you to think about Google things. Being biased to favor a technology is the worst thing you can be as an architect. You need to be concerned about making your customers successful. If you start having technology favorites and vendor favorites, you'll actually not be helping your clients at all. You'll be boxing them into something which may be potentially bad for them.
Okay, wonderful. The next question is going to be from Kay Greil or Craig K. Gristle. Is there an advantage of seeking the generative AI architect versus the cloud architect? Summer break begins today. I'm aware that I'm not able to master the content in a summer's worth of time. How much of a head start should I give myself with being able to focus during the summer? Let me see, I'm trying to break down the the verbiage. For all the ruckus of getting back in the swings of things. I guess they're asking how much can what's the time frame of what I can benefit while I'm on downtime for the summer?
A whole lot, if you dedicate a whole lot of time and effort to it. So I'll answer the first question. I'll get David's perspective as well. What kind of architect you want to be is really what you like. And I'll also give you some rules of architecture, except for the AI architect role. Generally speaking, the closer you are to the business and the further you are away from the technology, the more career opportunity you will have and the more you will earn. Meaning, the techie architect will typically earn much less than the executive architect like a David or I. So generally speaking, I like the cloud or the enterprise architect roles in a general manner. Now, AI architecture is something completely different. And the reason AI architecture is something completely different, I will get out my favorite macroeconomics supply and demand curve. I went to business school a few too many times because I love business. So here's the thing. Right now, if you've got a given demand and you've got a given supply, where those two interact and intersect is the actual price. So think of this in terms of salary. There are 1,000,001 programmers out there. It's taught in school, so programming salaries you can see are going to be very low. Now, when it comes to a cloud architect, now you've got someone that needs to understand the network. They need to understand the data center. They need to understand security. They need to understand storage. They need to understand data. They need to understand AI. Now they need to have business skills, leadership skills, sales skills, executive skills, emotional intelligence skills. And you can see it becomes very hard to find, so that's why you get a high salary. That's the cloud architect. Now, here's the thing. AI is probably the most disruptive technology in the world, meaning it has the ability to change the way we live, work, and play more than anything else that's actually out there right now. So now you've got the demand for the AI architect that's going up. And the supply of the AI architect is almost nobody. So now you're finding yourself in these supply and demand curves for salaries, which is sky high. Traditionally we're dealing with about $250,000 for a good AI, a good cloud architect, average decent cloud architect. David, I think you and I both know we've seen plenty of $1 million roles now for AI architects, right?
Yeah, we have, and they're starting to see a little more. Now, obviously, those are things you don't walk into.
Yeah.
And you may have to work your way up to it, but we're seeing the sky high salaries just around the demand and the importance of the technology. So this stuff's moving about 3 times the speed that cloud did back when cloud first started. I've never seen anything like it in my career. And so the demand is to race to build these things. They're going to have the strategic value for the company, and the companies are willing to pay sky high salaries.
Yep.
And everybody's going to benefit from that. Certainly, if they're paying someone $1 million an architect, it's not that big a deal to pay $500,000 or even $250,000
Yeah.
on these situations. So the salaries are moving up, and they're advertising them as well. It's not just one of these
Yeah.
things where you're walking into it negotiating.
No.
They're saying, "Hey, we're going to give you $500,000 if you come work for us." And that's all well and good. You have to make sure it's the right place for you to
Yes.
work. As my father said, you can get paid $1 million a year and be underpaid. You're getting the wrong job. However, it is kind of exciting to see those sorts of opportunities out there that they're willing to bring people in who have the basic sets of skills like we're training you here. And I think that's going to be sky's the limit. And that's going to go on for the next 3, 4, 5 years, at least and then something else will come along and take it over. But the thing is, there'll always be huge demand in those fields, whether it's a cloud architecture, AI architecture, even other IT architects and other strategically focused positions.
And that's the thing. You can still find good $500,000 plus cloud architect jobs as well. What do you want to do? David said it best. There's not enough money in the world to do a job you don't like. My second job, I got to tell you what it was. So after I left internal medicine, I worked at MCI WorldCom as a lead architect, and the largest market maker on the NASDAQ reached out to me and said, "We need someone to design the fastest trading system in the world with us. And we're willing to pay you anything." So I was all excited, right? I was a young kid. I didn't know much about anything. All of a sudden, it's like $150,000 more than my last job. And that was, years ago, like 20 plus years ago. So it was like $300,000-$400,000 raise over my last job. And now I'm on Wall Street. And I got to tell you, it was the worst job that I had. It was 2.5 hours of commuting the 30 miles to get there, 2.5 hours to come home. Nothing worked because the technology was pushing it. Everybody was hot-headed. I mean, it was such a nightmare that each day I got home and I said to my wife, I said, "I don't know how many more months I can do this. Let's just save money, pay off our house in cash, and then I'm getting out of here." So you got to do a job that you like. Because if you don't like it, you're not going to be passionate about it. If you're not going to be passionate about it, you're not going to want to learn more. If you're not passionate about it and you don't want to learn more, you're not going to excel. So pick something you like. Or is there advantage to being an architect over a cloud architect? Not really. They're all good jobs, but you got to do one that matters for you. Some people just want to focus on business and very little on the technology. We've got the enterprise architect program for that, and I'm real proud of it. And that's a role that I've enjoyed very much, and I know David's done it too. Some people want to be a little more technical and they want to be in the cloud world. I love it. It's one of my favorite jobs in the world. I know David's done it for decades. He was Deloitte's lead cloud strategist. That's the ultimate cloud architect out there. And then there's other people like me that if I can get geeky on a network and design a network, it may pay me less, but it makes me really happy because I love networking. So, what makes you happy? What's going to make you tick? What's going to make you want to wake up and be happy? You get that and you marry that with a good salary, you've got the best job ever. At least that's my perspective. And please feel free to ask your questions. Now, Claire, you mentioned you're not from an IT background. I'd love to know what your background is. And I bet you might be more advantaged to be a cloud architect than if you actually had a technical background. I'm curious to know what your background is.
Also, Kay had mentioned, yes, Alonzo, please expound about the generative AI development program. I'm going to defer to this gentleman above me, David. Could you get a little bit in the weeds there, sir?
Sure. So one more time with the question. I didn't get the last part.
I guess Kay is looking for a deeper understanding of the generative AI program.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, it's basically getting you soup to nuts into having enough skill sets and understanding and knowledge of the processes, certainly probably more than 80%, 90% of the other architects out there, and how to run the business process and how to define, how to build and deploy a generative AI system or systems. And so it's teaching you to have a leadership role where we're focused on a particular pattern of technology, in this case, AI. And so whether it's generative AI or machine learning based deep learning systems, the same sort of moving parts are going to exist, but it's taking you through the requirements. It's taking you through the understanding of the requirements, it's taking you through defining the systems, talking to the stakeholders, setting up the meetings, what to be said in the meetings, what kind of information you gather into meetings, how to deal with an understanding of the data, how to deal with an understanding of the core processes, how to deal with an understanding what they want to get out of those systems in terms of value that comes back to the business, making a lot of tough choices. In some cases, tell them that this should not be AI. You're going to spend too much money to solve this problem. And then if it is determined that that's the direction that you're going, the ability to work with a team and get through the engineering steps that other people are doing for you, the data science stuff that other people are doing for you, dealing with ethics, which is a core foundation to this. It's a huge thing you need to pay attention to, all the way through deployment, operations, and the ability to understand how to define the metrics back to the system. And you're not doing the work in that situation. You're orchestrating a team to make that happen. So your ability to understand the processes and what people are doing, but not doing the work, and how the role you play in orchestrating these solutions, which is becoming probably the single most important role in making these things successful. They can have great engineers, they can have great scientists, data scientists, great ethicists, people who have deep knowledge in different technologies. If you don't have this role in terms of rolling out the solution that's going to bring in value to the company, in some cases, it's going to make the company, it becomes foundational to what the company is, you're not going to be successful. I'm teaching you to be that person. So hopefully that was clear.
Pretty detailed, David. Thank you so much.
We have a very dangerous question that I want to address before we get to the next one. And that's from Hyacinth Mayamo. He asked, does mastering cloud architecture require a deep understanding of cloud provider services? If so, does this mean the most valuable skills are gained through hands-on in-field experience rather than spending months in training waiting to be hired? So what do you mean by hands-on? And here's the thing, 99% of the people that come to us have been doing hands-on labs and cloud projects for 2 to 3 years. They've taken cloud mastery boot camps and learned Python and SysOn and DevOps. They've gotten master's degrees and learned to code and have 10 certifications. You cannot, under any circumstances, learn how to build, learn how to design by system building. That's why the people don't hire the construction workers to design buildings. So, Hyacinth, let me ask you some questions. And this is so, to maybe put it into context. An organization has a 6.79 weighted average cost of capital. How would you leverage that information to determine whether you should build them a hybrid private cloud like Nutanix versus OpenStack versus leveraging the public cloud? How would you design the secure demilitarized zone for remote access employees, a company that has 200,000 remote access employees? How would you design a computational platform for an AI system that needs to learn at a certain rate at a certain time? How would you create the wide area network on a cloud for a car or for a car manufacturer that has 3,000 extranet partners? You're not going to learn any of that by doing hands-on anything. That's going to teach you how to build. How to design requires you to be trained. Physicians have to go to medical school to learn pharmacology, to learn anatomy, to learn physiology, to learn pathology. They have to learn it, and you can't learn it other than through training. Now, I got to tell you, I have people that come to me with 20 years engineering experience that are experts on cloud services, but they can't present it to the customer. They can't sell it to the customer. They don't know how to design the systems. They know how to build them. So you can do all the labs you want, and if that's your goal, go ahead and do it. But when you're not hired as an architect 3, 4, or 5 years from now, please take training somewhere that's going to teach you how to do system design. It's why I have to retrain cloud engineers. It's why I have to retrain everybody else's bootcamp graduates, because here's what they're taught: Python, SysOps, DevOps, coding, Terraform, and there's no components in our job. So that's why I wanted to address it. David, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that you may need to understand things in the abstract, but if you're looking at particular services, that's going to be of no help. In fact, it may be counter to the helps. In other words, if I understand how that storage exists and the process of storage and when you would leverage storage, but AWS, S3 versus EBS versus, all the other stuff out there is absolutely useless information to an architect. In fact, it could be damaging because I tell you what, lots of architectures like to get into the whole lingo stuff. In other words, they get down into a particular technology and they can list the serverless technology and serverless functions, things like that. To me, that immediately eliminates them from credibility because
Yep.
they're not thinking in terms of architecture. They're thinking in terms of how you're going to leverage technology. That doesn't mean we don't need those skills. Someone has
No.
to do the work to pick some of this stuff from a tactical point of view, but you can't do that as an architect. You're giving that to other people who have those skills to make those decisions. And that separation of duty is the success of this. And I think some of the trouble we got into in the early days of cloud is because the cloud architects were getting into the weeds on some of this stuff. They weren't looking for other alternative solutions. They weren't looking for the right platforms for these workloads. And that left them in a state where they were picking the wrong solutions. That's why we're going through the repatriation right now. Repatriation is short for we made a mistake and bad decisions around architecture. And normally that's going to be, cloud first, AWS first, Microsoft first, Google first, that kind of biased decision making that was an epidemic, 5 years ago, even now in many instances. And so your ability to think above that, think in the abstract, think conceptually is going to be your ability to win this stuff. If you get too down in the weeds, you've lost it.
Mm.
And I took 2 photos of my backyard, which really explains the whole architecture piece and why we can't get too close to the technology. Here's the first one. See this cute squirrel, everybody? Got nice eyes, little ears, a fancy tail. That's a squirrel that's in my backyard. Everything looks great, right? We're looking at the squirrel is happy, it's all good. At least it seems that way. And the engineers have to focus this deep on what's directly in front of them, because if they can't focus on what's in front of them, they can't do their job. Now, we architects have to take this big picture view, because here's what was really going on when I took this photo. See, there's this beautiful little girl with pointy ears and a tail. Her name is Cindy. That's my little girl. Cindy was actually thinking about how she could eat that squirrel for lunch. But if you're focused on the squirrel, you miss the big picture. And that's why we can't have engineers doing our architecture. Our architects focus on the big picture. We work with the engineers that are experts in the technology. And that way we don't get eaten by the little Cindy, the cat over there, like the squirrel did. So I took that out of order because I hope that made it clear for all of you guys why we can't do that. And like David said, if anybody's too techie, I'm going to be concerned about hiring them. And if they're too big on any AWS service, they're probably going to be biased towards an AWS service. You see it on LinkedIn. I'm the serverless guru. Sorry. Please leave. Please leave, because to you, you're like a hammer and everything is like a nail and everything needs to be serverless. To kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Plus, you're also going to need to know the wisdom when not to use the cloud provider services, which at least 50% of the cases.
Well, I think it ties in exponentially on what these two gentlemen have said. So we've gotten questions where can you be some sort of super ninja architect / engineer that consolidates these type of roles into this multi-million-dollar salary? That doesn't happen.
No.
You can't be a aviator and a submarine pilot at the same time. Choose your path. Focus on what you love. Then you go hard on that. Okay. So I think that's just was really prevalent to say. So I think another question, I believe this might be our last one, gentlemen. So we encourage everyone to ask questions. Is there something wrong with wanting to digest information you provide and becoming proficient with these skills, but not wanting to certify with any vendor, as I believe it's all marketing ploys?
Well, here's the thing. I'm not big on certifications. I don't know if you even have any certifications, Karen, at this point, David. I don't care about my certifications. Honestly, you wouldn't even know if I have them other than the CCIE, because it has honestly no bearing on what we do. So then the question is, should you get them? Well, I would still get 2 or 3. And the reason is certifications typically don't have anything to do with your competency or ability to do the job, because they teach something else. But they do make it a little easier for you to get an interview if nobody knows who you are. So I do tend to like 1 or 2. Now, I'll make it very clear to you, Kay Gristle, I've gotten plenty of people hired with no certifications. Delroy Batt got his first cloud security architect job out of our training with 0 certifications. Robert Welch had a cloud practitioner before he got hired, and he got a great cloud security architect job out of our training. Jeffrey West, who was a geologist doing some kind of GIS, geospatial, geographic imaging. I don't really understand it. It was kind of cool, though. He got hired by Calian as a cloud architect after our training. It was his first tech job, and that was he had a cloud practitioner. So I've gotten lots of people hired without certifications. But here's the thing. First thing you need to do is get skills. Get your skills. Because nobody can hire you without your skills. Now, the reality is for David and I to go take an AWS certification exam with all the knowledge we have, all we got to do is spend a day, learn their silly names of a service, and get a practice test, do some multiple choice tests, and we can pass any exam we want. Because when you actually have the competency, these exams are really nothing. They're really not. Here's why they're hard for most people. They go take an exam, they start talking about EC2 instances. I'm literally not joking. You can go through every other AWS certification course out there and not even realize that EC2 is a virtual machine. And, then they give you their fluff of a G instance does this, and an E instance does this, and an I instance does this. Guess what? Marketing fluff. I can't use any of that. I need to look at the CPU cores, the CPU frequencies, the amount of DRAM, and I can make my own determination of what kind of virtual machines to use. All that marketing stuff is fluff. But I will tell you there is a benefit of getting 1 or 2 certifications after you're skilled. But secret, after you have the skills, because you can spend a day or 2 to pass these certifications when you have the skills. You could spend 6 months getting these certifications when you don't have the skills. And if you get the certifications and don't have the skills, you know what you can do with them? I mean, if you've got a cold, you could blow your nose in them because they're as good as they're on paper, but they're not going to get you hired because nobody can hire you on the basis of certifications. They have to hire you based on skills.
Yeah. Well said. And Kay Gristle says, thank you for the explanation of repatriation. I was with CloudReach, Atos, a French company which had massive layoffs, and I recall repatriation being thrown around. Go ahead, Mike.
And that's because, and if you've got questions, please ask. It's going to be real hard to find a David and me in the same room at the same time, live, where you can come off mute and ask any questions you want. So please ask them. We want to help you.
And this is for free.
And it's for free, not $1,200 an hour like it would normally be. So please, with a 26-week wait, please ask your questions. We really want to help you. But the key is, you have to be able to understand what you're trying to do. In AWS i3 instance is an Xeon E526, I think 70-something V3 processor. You can buy these servers right now used from Amazon for for about $800. You could pay $1,000 a month to run them on Amazon, these same servers. $800 once, $1,000 a month on Amazon. And that's not assuming you don't even use any data and send it back and forth on your network. That's just for the virtual machine rental, which is cheaper. Now, what happened is all these people were told cloud computing is cheaper. Well, it could be. It might not be. What are your workloads? How are they running? Are they running sporadically? Are they running all the time? What kind of workloads are there? The analysis has to be done. We teach you how to run that analysis. But what happened is everybody thought, oh, the cloud's cheaper. I got a bunch of AWS certified people. They said it's cheaper. So let's go do it. And then they realized it's 2.5 times more expensive. And then it was like, oh, wait, we wasted all this money. Now we got to go out. Oh, wait, AI. Now we got to go back to the cloud. We have to add that element of business acumen. We have to have that knowledge of what are we standing, what are we doing, what are our goals, where are we achieving? This is architecture.
And Kay Gristle has a follow-up. I like security, and am I going in another direction with an interest in the generative AI architect program?
Yes. Now, there is an integration of security in AI, but if you want to be an airplane pilot, you want to be an airplane pilot. It's different than being an attorney. If your goal is to be a security architect, look, we can train you in our cloud architect program. We've got a lot of security people, architects getting hired at it because we put so much security into it. If your goal is AI, you take an AI architect program. If your goal is to be a network architect, you take a network architect program. It is a different skill set for each one of these things. Now, there will be a lot of carryover, a huge amount of carryover. For example, how you design an architecture, how you get the requirements, how you sell, how you lead, how you present yourself, all that will help you. And any of our architecture programs have that, all of them, because you won't be successful in life. But if your goal is security, you probably should study more security. If your goal is AI, I'd recommend you learn more AI. It's not that I don't want to sell programs. It's that I want to make sure that you find yourself in the right place. I think you'll have more opportunity in AI than you will security, by far. I think you'll earn more in AI than you will security. by far. And here's the reason. In addition to all those supply and demand curves, I want you to think about the difference between something that people think is fun versus versus what people think they need. So I know lots of people that'll spend money on a beautiful house, right? And they'll go cheap because they don't have completely the money on the electrical wiring inside the house. They'll skimp on outlets, they'll skip on lights in the ceilings, and the reason is they look at what you can see. The people can instantly say, I get an AI architect in my system, I can enhance our organization's productivity, I can probably get rid of 20% of my low performance or replace them by AI. So there's an immediate money thing that's going on to the company with regards to AI. And people are all over that money. Now it's security. Now it's like, do I really want to spend money on the security thing? And for security, it's all about risk quantification and showing them, what the risk quantification is. And then they have to determine how they want to manage that risk. Do they spend a lot of money and manage that risk, or do they transfer the risk by buying cyber security insurance and let themselves get hacked? So I hope that makes more sense why organizations are much more excited there. Now, there is a merging of security in AI. So we're now dealing with security appliances that are leveraging AI. And if you have a better knowledge of AI, it will help you. So for example, we can take all the logs that come in, we can take them in as streaming data. We can manage them with the SIEM system. Some of them use AI, or we can also use AI to mine through all of our log files. The best firewalls now are leveraging artificial intelligence to be able to look for anomalies and patterns of behavior that look like a problem. And it is integrated into AI, but I would still consider that to be more security than more AI. But there is an intersection.
Okay. And I think that segued into Shamika's question about what about AI security? We need security in AI, correct?
We do, but it's, of course. But the level of security that the AI architect will focus on versus the security architect will focus on difference. So here's security, end-to-end everything. Everything from the physical security to whether you have dogs, to whether you have SEAL snipers on the roof, to how you lock your buildings, what the security policy is, how you train your people, things like avoiding anti-malware type environments or anti-phishing campaigns or anti-social engineering campaigns, what your security policy needs to look like, what your incident response procedures need to look like, your demilitarized zone, your defense in depth versus your zero trust versus how you advertise, all that goes under security. And those security people are going to be focused on all of it. So if you're an AI architect, you're going to consult a security architect to help you with your security because they know security better. But the security architect is going to be focused on everything as for now. Now, maybe 5 years from now, there's a such thing, or 10 years from now, there's a such thing as an AI security architect, but we're not there yet. So I want to make sure that you have the maximum opportunity for the maximum number of jobs at the highest salary possible. And if you want to be great at security, here's how you get great at security. You live it, you eat it, you breathe it, you sleep it, you become great at security. How do you become great at AI? Well, first you start by taking David's course, and then you live it, you eat it, you breathe it, you sleep it. How do you become great at cloud architecture? You can take our course, and you live it, you eat it, you breathe it, you sleep it, and you try to get better every day. So I want you to be great at your job, not somebody else's.
Gentlemen, I think this concludes. We're all caught up. With any questions, everyone, I encourage you to take advantage of these gentlemen. You've got two powerhouses right here with decades of experience in cloud architecture, generative AI, and a plethora of other skill sets that would definitely leverage you be rock stars out here by listening to these gentlemen and taking advantage of it. Also want to chime in again on our Memorial Day sale, 50% off on everything on our website. We have that available for you, and we look forward to working with you all to become architects and skyrocket your career to places where you never thought possible.
Yeah, and with the Memorial Day sale, our tuition is about 1 day's average salary, 1 day's average pay for the average graduate. I don't think you'll find a more comprehensive program that offers it at our cost, because we're all about changing lives here.
Yeah.
So any last questions before David and I go back to our daily jobs?
Going once, going twice. 3 times the charm, gentlemen.
All right, well, take care of everyone. My team popped the link. Can you pop a link to our AI architect program in the chat box, Joe? as well as our Cloud Architect program as well, so that people can have access to either or. And Chell provided a link to our programs where it is 50% off.
Well,
Thank you,
gentlemen,
s-
I always want to say thank you, Mike, David. It's always a pleasure seeing you on the screen. And everyone, you have a wonderful day or evening, and we look forward to seeing you all next time.
Take care, everyone.
Cheers, guys. Have a good Memorial Day weekend.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful weekend.